on my YouTube channel, and I'll give you the link. Anytime you go and watch it. All right. So what we did was we went to understand under the chapter one. We went to understand why Python, why program. Started by understanding what computer is all about, how computer can help us, right? Can be helpful. How computer can be helpful, right? And then we understand what is user. We understand that the computer is expecting us to do what? To put information. That is asking us what is the next. You understand the programmers what anticipates needs. That's their needs. The trend. Everybody's moving towards the trend of money making, right? So where is it happening? What can I do to solve problems? Like we say that money are hidden in problems. If you be able to solve problems, the money will appear. Then we went ahead to understand users versus programmers. Who are users and who are programmers, right? So we say that users are people who use the tools designed by programmers. Programmers are people who build tools that users use on their daily basis, right? Good. Went ahead to talk about why be a programmer. Be a programmer because you want to solve tasks, want to make the world a better place. Okay? You are a problem solver. That's why you are a programmer. All right? Then we now talk about levels of what? A programming. Levels of programming. And we said different units. We have the users at the application level. We have the programmers on the computer level, on the system levels, who write codes that users will use to perform tasks. But the programmers will depend on something, right? Something like some data, some information, and network for them to be able to write an effective, functionable programs. We went ahead to understand what is code, software, and a program. I said that a program is a sequence of stored instruction that are issued to a computer to perform an intelligent task. Without that instruction, a computer is a dummy that can stay without doing nothing. But it's the instruction that you embed in the computer that makes the computer smart. If not, the computer is more or less like a dolly. So anybody that instructs a computer to perform a task, the person must be kind of creative, right? So that code you embed into a computer is kind of a creative act. That's why sometimes we call it intellectual intellectual properties. All right, call it intellectual property. So the code you write and give to the computer to perform a task is out of your intellectual capabilities. So it is your intellectual property. So we give example of people who are humans program. That is like a dancing step, moving by hands and leg at a space of time based on a beating of a song. Python programs for Python. We now talk about programs for Python. Example, this is just example of a program that I said don't worry about this because this is a program that can help us to do or calculate what? Calculate how many numbers of words we have in a file. Okay, don't worry about this. We are going to do it in subsequent class coming. Now we now look at the architecture of the hardware. Because before you write a program, you need to understand the architecture of a program, right? So you know actually which particular unit is actually processing your program. You said, okay, we have a Raspberry Pi. That this is a combination. This is just like a whole computer on its own, very small, just like your phone that you can slot in your pocket. Okay. Then we now talk about it. Say that we have the first of all the central processing unit. We have the main memory. We have the what? We have the secondary memory, and we have the input and output device. This is a generic what? Generic what? Computer. A generic what? Computer. It's called a generic exactly. Without this component, your computer is not complete. We have the input and output. We have the central processing unit. We have the memory, main memory. We have the secondary memory. The main memory is actually close to the CPU, whereas the secondary memory is indirectly related to CPU through the main memory. Then when I talk about some definition of the memory and the CPU, those keywords, central processing unit, it says what? It runs the program. The CPU is always wondering what to do. So without any task that you give to it, it's very dummy but very fast, right? So it's more or less dummy. We have the input devices like the keyboard, mouse, touch screens. We have the output devices like the screen speaker, printer, DVD, and the DVD burner. We have the main memory, that which is like fast, small temporal storage, but lost on reboots, which is like it goes off. If your system goes off, it wipe off. The secondary memory is slow, hard, large what permanent storage. Last until deleted what the disk. It will last except you deleted the disk or destroyed the disk. And I said there are two types of it: the hard HDD and SSD. HDD stands for what? Hard disk drive. While SSD stands for what? Solid state drive. Now the instruction is being queued into the memory. The memory will have to be converted into machine code, and then the machine code can now be interpreted and processed in the processor. Because processor cannot process any human readable code, it must be translated into a machine code for the processor to process it. That's the structure. Now talk about the CPU. It's always hot, but we need to cool it because anytime it's processing your code, it's always getting hotter. The more the line of code, the more the hotter. So we always have a cooling system to embed. But before we attach a cooling system, I say that we must have apply what called processor paste. Processor paste will be applied on top of it, right? So that any person who try to run, try to absorb heat, because the processor first helps to absorb heat from the processor out of the system through the cooling fan. They'll talk about the hard disk that writes the data to the disk. That's called HDD. Then we talk about Python as a language. How come about Python? And who is this guy behind Python language? Said this. So this guy is the person that developed Python. We talk about the earlier learning called syntax error. Like somebody who made error, if you key information that the system did not understand, you have error. I will try to understand what is syntax and semantics. Syntax said syntax is keywords that you put it into the computer. But if computer do not understand it, it will throw a syntax error. Then we have symmetric that you need to align your code in a meaningful way that the computer will understand. If you do not put it that way, you will get error. talking to the computer. We said for us, we have a terminal that we can use to talk to a computer. If you have installed Python, you can just type what? Can just type what? Can just type Python and enter. This is your Python. You can. This is where you can write your code, right? But there are other as standard IDs we use in writing Python programming language, right? And those IDs are called. You can write your code in VS Code, but the ID that designed for Python programming is called PyCharm, which is what yes, which is what we are going to be using in our next subsequent class. Now, this is a line of code that helps us to print x is equals to 1, print x is equals to x plus 1, print x. Then we run exit. And from what I just mentioned earlier, that print is a function, exit is also a function. X equals to 1, x equals to 1 is what? An assignment what? Operation statement. Why? Yes. Yes. Why? Exactly. Good. Now the next thing we talk about, what do we say? Now we say we're elements of Python. We have what we call vocabulary words. So vocabulary words, we call it in Python variables and reserved words. We are going to treat them later. Then we have sentence structure, like valid syntax pattern. Valid syntax pattern. Then we have story structure, that is constructing a program for a purpose. You have story structure, constructing a program for a purpose. So I have a problem I needed to solve, compare, check, count how many words in a file. It's a particular task I want to achieve. If I want to delete or rename a particular keyword in a file, is another separate type of structure I need to write. Those are them are not the same. So every task comes with its own structured program, structured story structure. You get. Then we get example of a way a short story about how to count numbers, words in a file in Python. And finally, we talk about the reserved words. The reserved words are not used as a variable name or identifiers because it has been reserved for a purpose by Python. We talked about sentence or lines. Sentence on line. Talk about x is equals to 2 is assignment statement. x is equals to x plus 2 is also assignment with expression. Print x is a print statement, which is a function. That's actually where we stop for today. So next tomorrow we talk about what programming paragraphs. Programming paragraphs. So thank you.